And thank you so much for being with us here on Morning Live. Now, former President Jacob Zuma is due to return to the Pietermaritzburg High Court today. Proceedings are expected to be brief as a date for the trial will be discussed. Zuma and his co-accused, French arms company Thales, face charges of fraud, corruption, money laundering and racketeering, which are linked to the multi-billion rand arms deal. Now, to discuss this further, we're joined by legal journalist Karyn Maughan. Karyn, good morning and thanks for speaking to us here on Morning Live.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just start with a quick overview of what has transpired and exactly what the former president is charged with.
Well, essentially, Jacob Zuma has been charged with having a corrupt relationship with his former financial advisor, Schabir Shaik, over the course of many years. The state alleges that he received benefits totaling around 4.5 million rand, though that amount may increase because of additional payments that the state says it's unearthed over the period of time, including everything from paying school fees to car washes, etc., etc., etc. The state alleges that Jacob Zuma received these benefits in exchange for his largesse and political influence in assisting Shaik in his business. And part of that, the state alleges, was Shaik facilitating a 500,000 rand a year bribe for Zuma from French arms company Thales, which scored in the region, I think, of about 2 billion rand from the very controversial arms deal. And essentially, that he did so in exchange for his so-called political protection from any potential investigation into the arms deal. He's also been charged under the Prevention of Organised Crime Act with racketeering, in that the state alleges he was part of a criminal enterprise with Shaik. That's a very serious charge. It carries with it a 25-year sentence. And he's also been charged with tax evasion and fraud as well as corruption.
So, Karyn, what can we expect in court today, given that the former president abandoned his last legal bid for a permanent halt in this corruption trial, and that, of course, paving the way for his prosecution to go ahead?
Well, I think we can expect fireworks, actually, because we've seen a very strong exchange of correspondence between the defense and the state over today's over the future timeline of the case, and indeed over the disputed involvement of Judge President Ahmad Yapi in pre-trial arrangements, in what Zuma's legal team has said he suspects is secret and improper communication between Yapi and the state at a time in which the Deputy Judge President Mdondo was in fact handling the arrangements for this matter. We expect a lot of drama to play out in court today. Jacob Zuma very much adamant that he wants to go on trial in October this year, and that after repeatedly stating that it was ready to put him on trial in April, that the state should be ready to do so. I think, Sakina, one of the important things is that the fact that this hearing is happening at all shows that, that this is a particularly urgent and disputed issue, because in the normal course of events, under the directives issued by Yapi, only matters that are considered urgent are to be heard by judges in this court because of COVID. In the normal course of events, this entire matter should have been postponed.
Now, Karyn, as you say, hitherto the narrative has been that it was the former president who was stalling, but now it's, of course, the state that seems to be not ready to proceed. Can we read anything at all into that, quite apart from the legal battle that's playing out?
Well, I think it is going to be a slight potentially a very large public relations issue for the National Prosecuting Authority, because, there has been this history of saying that Jacob Zuma employs Stalingrad tactics to, litigate or to try and delay his case as much as possible. We know the state has gone on record numerous times saying that it would be ready to put him on trial in April. Obviously there are other issues at play here. There are requests for further particulars that have been lodged by Thales, as your colleague previously mentioned, seeking a great deal of documentation that was seized during raids, many of which is, stored in very old school formats. Remember, Sakina, this case has literally been going on since 2003. So a lot of, that information needs to be converted. But having said all that, in the court of public opinion, Jacob Zuma, has been cast as someone who was always trying to avoid his day in court. Now he's saying he wants to go on trial. It is somewhat of, a perception problem for the NPA that they are now in a position due to all these COVID complications, et cetera, they're now saying that they don't believe that this matter will be certified as trial ready. But we do expect Billy Downer to really take the court into his confidence and to try and convince it that indeed these are not issues that the state could have dealt with prior to the COVID issue, and these are simply things that they could never have foreseen. And it's going to be that issue that's going to be very important, not just in swaying the court about the timeline, but also swaying public opinion. Because if the NPA has gone on record and said it was ready to prosecute when it wasn't, Jacob Zuma may well have a bit of a kind of advantage in the way that he, continues to say that the state hasn't been dealing fairly with him.
Karyn, looking at those reasons advanced by Advocate Billy Downer, as a legal journalist, as someone who has followed this particular case very closely, do you buy into the COVID-19 excuse?
Look, I think that there have been problems, and I think that there are going to be issues with, in terms of these further particulars requests. We know Jacob Zuma, for example, asked for further information about the charges against him. But it doesn't look good. And I think that it's very important that Downer really take the court into his confidence and convince them that, that he needs more than 6 months to resolve this. Because if he doesn't do so, I think that, the public is really going to be somewhat let down about a case that we've literally been waiting to hear for 17 years.
And on the side of the former president, Karyn, what some would say is a seeming about turn that the former president now wants this trial to proceed and proceed soon. What do you make of that?
Well, it's very interesting. He's come out fighting. One of the interesting things, for example, will be if he actually arrives at court today, because that will send a message. Because the NPA has gone on record and said Jacob Zuma is considered vulnerable to COVID. We don't expect him to be here. And my understanding is that he does intend to appear because his legal team have come out guns blazing. When he dismissed Daniel Mancha, he made it clear that it was because he was finally ready to face this case. And I think that his legal team has gone out. We know that they are preparing, that they are ready, that they are going to ask the state pertinent questions about certain of the evidence against him. And I think that he is certainly in a position where he now, is very publicly coming out and saying, I'm ready to face these charges. I'm ready to potentially drop bombshells about, the arms deal, which I continue to maintain I've been wrongly blamed for the corruption in. Whether or not he does that remains to be seen. But he is clearly on the front foot here. And the NPA is going to have to do a bit of work to catch up to that.
So let's just for a minute look at the two legal teams, Advocate Billy Downer on the one side and the former president's legal team and the sort of gravitas that they bring to this case now, Karyn.
Well, the interesting thing is Jacob Zuma lost all of his legal funding from the state following a judgment. I think it was about in 2018. And essentially, my understanding is that a number of the lawyers that are representing him, if not all of them, are actually doing so on a pro bono basis. So there's clearly a level of passion and dedication to him that is informing what they're doing. Advocate Musi Sikhakhane, of course, very well known, a senior counsel. He's been involved in a number of matters, an anti-apartheid activist who, he was very involved in the struggle, and has repeatedly represented everyone from President Cyril Ramaphosa to presiding over the controversial SARS inquiry. So he's someone who has a lot of experience, is very respected, and clearly is extremely passionate about the cause of the president. And Tabani Masuku, also very well known for his representation of Judge President John Hlophe, very passionate in his addresses to the court. Sikhakhane, obviously a lot more sort of mediated in some of his submissions. We know that Eric Mabuza is extremely well known. He's represented everyone from Peter Moyo to Tom Moyane. He is someone who is very adept at engaging with the media, making sure that the side of the person that he's representing is adequately put out there. Billy Downer is a very fastidious and brilliant prosecutor. I mean, he did exceptionally well in the Sheikh case to get the conviction that he did. But he is now, I think, in his 60s. If this is the last case, this could potentially be the last case of his career. And, you know, he knows this material backwards. Barry Roux, of course, for Thales, no stranger to the media, having represented Paralympian Oscar Pistorius. So it really is a who's who of the legal community in South Africa. And it's going to be an absolutely fascinating case to watch. And I suspect that today's hearing is going to be equally fascinating.
And of course, Karyn, for a long time, there was a view that because Schabir Shaik had been found guilty, that this case was more or less cut and dry. You know, it was just a matter of getting Jacob Zuma to have his day in court. Do you believe that to be the case today?
I don't. And I think that the important thing to recognize is that, you know, Jacob Zuma's defense in this case is very likely to be the same as it was in his rape case, which is intention. That he may have received benefits, he may have received payments and assistance, but it was because he was in a financially very desperate situation, which was common amongst comrades in the ANC at the time, and that he was not receiving this money with any kind of corrupt intent on his part. That Sheikh may have abused or used his name to sort of garner business and to try and sort of permeate this air of being politically connected, but that in fact, you know, he had no intention to do anything wrong. Of course, you know, the big issue in regards to that is what was used in the Sheikh case was that 2001 letter that was signed by Zuma and sent to the head of SCOPA at the time, Gavin Woods, in which he said that the SIU must not investigate the arms deal. You know, that it was not the position that should actually happen. And that was a very important thing because, of course, you know, the SIU, if it had investigated the arms deal, could have potentially cancelled a number of those contracts, which would have had very adverse consequences for Thales. So in the Sheikh case, that letter was used as kind of a resounding sense of proof that Jacob Zuma had actually intervened on behalf of Thales in a way by sending that letter. He, of course, maintains that that letter was written by former President Thabo Mbeki and that he simply signed it. And that he had, you know, that this rhetoric that somehow he was the driving force behind it is simply not correct. So, you know, there are fascinating aspects to this matter which will have to find their way in court. But I think that people should not underestimate this idea that this is a cut and dried matter. I think that Jacob Zuma is going to come at this case from the point of intention. In terms of his interventions from Sheikh, we know he said in his permanent stay application that this was part of the culture of the ANC, that you did sort of fight the cause for black-owned business, and you know there was nothing untoward in that. And I think that is going to be the case that he makes, that essentially, like, yes, I may have received this money, but I wasn't doing it for corrupt reasons. I was doing it because I was in a financially dire situation, and I believe this was a person who was assisting me, and I also did pay some of this money back, and therefore it can never be said that I was simply receiving bribes the entire time. So it's not a cut and dried thing at all.
Well, Karyn, scintillating prospects indeed. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Karyn Maughan, legal journalist, sharing her insights on former President Jacob Zuma's court case, which kicks off today. All right, with that, South Africa